Ladies and germs, this is Neil Carney. I'm here with the Split Peak Soup podcast. Today we have a very special guest, a great friend of mine, musician, surfer, longtime Santa Cruz resident, Clifford Dinsmore. Clifford, I'm stoked to have you here today. How you doing?
Good. It's nice to finally be here. We've talked about it for a long time, so
Yeah, we have.
cool. It's happening.
Yes, that's how it happens.
Pleasure Point Live.
Yes, coming live from Pleasure Point
by the sea.
Yes, sir. So, Clifford, you just got back from a tour, is that correct?
It was just 3 shows,
Okay, 3 shows.
but it was supposed to be 4, but got COVID, and it was funny. It was all in Texas. We did Houston, Austin, Dallas, and they were just incredible shows. Then we had 2 days off, and we were going to go to Arizona. We were staying at Henry from Pentagram's house and St. Vitus, an old friend, and then woke up and tested positive, and my doctors had warned me, to be really careful.
Yeah.
That like COVID was surging, especially out there. So then after they said that, I looked it up, and Texas was like the epicenter.
Oh, no.
And it's kind of funny, you hear, oh yeah, whatever, COVID, but then it actually did screw it up.
Right.
Because, 2 of us got it, 2 out of 6.
Mm-hmm.
And it did make us have to miss the last show, which was burnt.
Yeah.
But it's just like nothing in the history of music has ever screwed up the music scene more than COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, just as an employee of the Catalyst and a band member, there was one time we're seized up. We were playing the Catalyst with Fear, and we all got sick and tested positive the day of the show. I mean, working at the Catalyst, there was always bands canceling, and it's just a thing,
Nightmare.
That's still going, and it's still like having an effect on the music scene.
Yeah, it's a
And
weird
it's pretty
thing.
burnt, Yeah, it is a very, very weird, unnatural thing. Like when I had COVID, I felt like it was very, definitely out of the ordinary, to say the least,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really hard to say these days with information and where we get our information and
Yeah.
where it's being directed, how it's being weaponized. I don't know. I just you can get caught up in kind of all the chaos around COVID. Oh, it wasn't real. That was, Bill Gates is trying to freaking neuter us or stuff. And it gets out there and deep, but yeah, we can't forget that it was a pretty gnarly thing that did actually happen.
No, it was. It's very, like I'm healthy, and all the people that I know, most of the people that got it, survived it, but it was definitely not fun, and it was a very serious thing. I mean, you get sick.
Yeah.
Really sick. It's like and it's a really unnatural feeling. It's just like feels like all your organs are failing, and your lungs are messed up, and your throat's sore, and your whole body like hurts, and it definitely is very weird and out of the ordinary. And I could see how like in the beginning, I know people that actually did die from it.
Right. Yeah.
And it was like, a lot of musicians and people that I know like either died or came very close.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one thing you don't come back from is the, dying part.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think as a, youngish, healthy person, I think that, our kind of, we get this false sense of security, and I understand a lot of the backlash against how COVID was handled and what it even is in general. But, a lot of the people who have that opinion aren't people who are going to be
I
liable
think
to
if
die.
everyone would have just done what the right thing to do at the time was just kind of squash it at the time of its existence, it would have been a lot different, and it wouldn't have lingered as long.
Mm-hmm.
But instead you had this moronic fucking, oops, I said the F word.
No, please, we like them here.
These moronic dipshits that just, I don't know. It's just like, there's just a time when you got to just kind of bite the bullet for a minute and acknowledge the situation for what it is, deal with it, and it'll go away.
Yeah.
Where instead, I think it made it linger a lot longer, the fact that people didn't really take it seriously,
Yeah, and
And
I'm
it became probably more serious than it had to be
sure,
because of that.
totally. Well, yeah. So we've got the herd mentality in the United States, and if you can't think for yourself, you're going to get swept up in that. And
Yeah, especially now, like the supposed age of information or age of disinformation. You know what I mean? It's just there's too much available. It used to just be like one bonehead, like it could be like when it comes to anything, like stupid things like racism or something, you get these like people that like project all this stuff, and they might have like a bunch of other like racist pen pals around the world or something, you know what I mean? And they might be like 300 strong or something talking their stupid shit, you know what I mean? But now with the internet, all of a sudden they could just, you know,
yeah,
pull people from just the dredges of society, and all of a sudden they're like a million strong, you know what I mean? The internet has just made things so ridiculous in terms of like how they can project disinformation and bad information and project bad ideas and hate,
yeah,
and just carry on, carry the flag of hate like way farther than it actually needs to be.
yeah. It's fine tuning the weaponization of hate and xenophobia and
Yeah.
all these really destructive things. And for people, maybe in their waking life, they might not be super popular, might not have great social skills, so they're not really getting feedback from people in the real 3D world.
Yeah,
So they
that's
go
true.
into the
A
internet
virtual,
place,
like,
yeah, and they're popular. They've got their fucking, their agenda, and they're just, yeah, it's just kind of a really sickening type of thing and sickening time to live in the world. But yeah, so I think that I have great conversations with you about a lot of this stuff. And just going back into the music a little bit, you're basically like a poet. You write lyrics. You get to talk about a lot of these subject matters in your music. And was that something like early on that you felt like, I have this voice and I can speak on these matters that might be disturbing or discouraging, or that I have no power over, that are happening around me? And that kind
yeah.
of lines up with punk rock and heavy metal too.
More than anything for me, it's just a good medium of expression. You know what I mean? And an outlet. It's like you could be as political or as apolitical in music as you want, or
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in between. You know what I mean? But it's just like there's always, coming from punk rock. I mean, punk rock has always traditionally been really political.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I try to write in more of like a vague, like non-specific term to make it, more timeless
Yeah.
than trying to just cling to a certain person in a certain era or a certain specific thing that kind of tends to date it,
Yeah.
years later. And I think that's why like BL'AST is like, been so, has held up so well over the years and keeps drawing new people in because it is kind of a timeless thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like really, I mean, there is some stuff like Nightmare and songs like that where it's more like directly linked to the time period.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, it's always just, asking a lot of like philosophical or important questions, kind of just self evaluation,
Yeah.
and definitely a slightly political theme in terms of like the world is ridiculous. What can we do to fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Don't fall into the stupidity.
Right.
Has always been the overall message. But it's like, and then there's Seized Up, which again is definitely way more blatantly political, but not, like I said, I try to keep things in sort of a, just a slightly think for yourself and come to your own kind of conclusions kind of
Yeah.
deal, where it
Self-contained.
inspires a lot of thought. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be like telling people what to think. You know what I mean? I want people to come to their own conclusions. And then Dusted Angel is just more, just whatever. A lot of similar. There's always a similar theme. I'm always going to be questioning the current political climate
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of the direction of the world and all that. You know what I mean? And it just comes out in different ways.
Yeah.
And then there was Space Boy, which was just totally surreal. Just like weird fantasy metal weirdness or something,
Yeah.
but
Well, that's good. We
each
need
band
that.
is totally different lyrically for sure.
Yeah. Well, for all the heavy stuff, every once in a while we need to hear about like wizards, and that's what I kind of like about the kind of the stoner rock, going into different genres of. Well, we were
Yeah.
talking a little bit about subcultures within music before we started rolling, and that was something that I was going to ask you about. So Santa Cruz is kind of known for having this punk kind of presence. I think in
Yeah.
the mid 80s and the early 90s, it hit this kind of, whether or not it was bubblegum punk or what, that was kind of synonymous with Santa Cruz. And somewhere like, the desert rock scene, that was a little bit
Yeah.
more sludgy, and stoner rock, I think, is another way to describe it.
Yeah, Santa Cruz, because of the skate scene and people, people who surf getting involved in the skate scene, and a lot of people do both or whatever. And it's like, like the skaters really like took to punk immediately, back in the like Dwayne Peters, Steve Olson, and Steve Olson's really cool. He used to live here forever. And it's like, when you were into punk in the old days, I mean, it was like you knew everyone who was into it. There was so few people involved. Like I remember doing some photo shoot thing, and for Santa Cruz Surf Shop, when me and Chris Green and Mark Machado and all these people like rode for them, and Judy Oyama approached me and was just like, hey, and she's an old friend of mine. Like I love Judy,
Yeah.
and she was talking about a friend that had just moved from San Jose. And she's like, hey, my friend Keith, they call him Meekster. He's just moved here from San Jose, and he's super into punk, and he doesn't know anyone. And, I really think you guys should like talk. So like she gave me my number, and I called him up. And it was so funny because, like now he's just like super local, like everyone loves him,
Yeah.
and it just, everyone has to kind of earn their part, before they're accepted. I was like, music made me way more open-minded. Like I would just be another dude like throwing rocks at people like off the cliff and
Yeah.
calling them kooks and doing whatever, which I to this day might occasionally still do, but
Yeah.
but at the time it really opened my mind, you know what I mean? And I've always been the kind of person where if you're respectful and you show respect, you're welcome from anywhere in the world, whatever. And it was so funny. So when Keith first moved here from San Jose, like my friends were like, why are you hanging out with that dude from the valley and stuff? And we would go and like secretly trade records at the Hook.
Yeah.
We'd meet at the Hook and we would trade records. And then we got to be super good friends, and, like would surf, and he wanted to, get into surfing. So I'd take him down to the beaches and we'd find our own peak, and,
Yeah.
and then he just, was able to kind of integrate his way into the scene. But it was just really, there was a really closed-minded vibe back then, especially. And like I said, I'm really thankful that, because I was just as much into it as anyone else, the whole localism scene and all that stuff. But music pulled me out of that. You know what I mean? And it kind of broadened my horizons and broadened my mind, and allowed me to like be, meet new people from different places and not just be so confined to here, which would be, a terrible life to just be some bitter, terminal local dude that doesn't get out and doesn't accept people from other places and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think when I was in like seventh grade or something like that, I was getting picked on by a lot of the kids around the point, and like the kids at school, and I was just like, "Fuck this, dude! Like, I don't deserve this treatment, anyways." And I started hanging out with some kids who were skateboarders,
yeah,
and like we all skated around here, but these were like real skaters, and like I just thought it was so cool. I'm like, here I live 3-minute walk from the point, and I'm getting fucking bagged on by kids in my own neighborhood, but I can go over here and hang out with these kids who are on skateboards and just go across town. And it was a little bit less kind of like segmented, it's not like this is your spot. It's like you fucking hit up all the skate parks. And so that kind of like Cro-Magnon thought process of just like, this is my spot or my wave. It's like skateboarding is a little bit more democratic. And so, that my mind was opened up like that young, and I could see how it'd be the same even if not more for music, because you can play music anywhere in the United
Yeah,
States and
definitely.
in any garage.
Yeah, and it was always, I mean, Santa Cruz has always been a place where tons of people from other places have always come through. And Santa Cruz originally, before the Silicon Valley and, the parasitic outside developers kind of got their claws in it, it was just basically kind of a surf ghetto, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was just like the whole keep Santa Cruz weird thing. It wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
place that wasn't like, people just kind of wrote it off as like some kind of like sleepy hippie town or something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And for some reason, even though it was total paradise back then, people just didn't really want to be here
Right.
like they do now. You know what I mean? And it was
Yeah.
just a trip. Like, it's always been an interesting place, and it's like it's almost like the punk scene and the skate scene, and just it kind of was almost a weird rebellion against the slight hippie culture of Santa Cruz, maybe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm into hippie culture too. I like hippies way more than I like, like yuppies and
Yeah. You
normal
had your hair
people.
long there for a minute as
Oh
well.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, well, I grew my hair because too many like kooky people were getting into punk, and I was just
Yeah.
like, okay, now people that used to like give me shit or try to beat me up because I was a punker. Now
Yeah.
they've got short hair and tattoos on their neck, and that just made me just go
Yeah. That's
grow my
sick.
hair out.
Yeah.
I always
Well,
try to be on the opposite spectrum of the popular trend.
yeah. Well, and this is interesting to me because, like, I've seen a lot of the pictures of like the late 70s, early 80s. It's like guys like you and Chris Green, like long blonde
Oh
hair
yeah,
surfer dudes. And like, what was that transition like, from like, the children of these hippies,
yeah.
starting as these little like beach, you know, rugrats and stuff, and then kind of morphing into this time where like punk rock came in, and then surfing got a little bit more aggressive and stuff like that. What was that shift like in the 80s around Pleasure Point and beyond?
I mean, it was just kind of natural. It just evolved out of the music and like more aggressive styles of surfing, like the whole Australian thing, and like the way that surfing was just taking off in a more progressive or performance oriented direction. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where people were just, it was definitely became a more aggressive style of surfing and stuff like that. And the music just kind of naturally morphed into it. And the skating, influenced surfing and
Mm-hmm.
made surfing more, like, taking it to levels that people never thought were even possible. You know what I mean? And it was kind of like the music just sort of, the way it evolved, at first it like didn't seem like anyone was into BL'AST
Mm-hmm.
or into, punk. And then when BL'AST started doing it, all of a sudden all the like surf people and skate people and everybody just started going to the shows. You know what I
Right.
mean? Where you'd be like, whoa, like we'd play at, there was one show we played, it was really hard to play in Santa Cruz back in the day for us because there was nowhere to play.
Mm-hmm.
But, we'd have a show at like, we did one at the university and there was like 1,000 people there and it was insane. And we're like, wow, okay. And it was just kind of this thing where it's, people just took to the music, and the aggression of the music and the outlet part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it was fun. It was really a lot of fun back then.
Yeah.
In the 80s, like the 80s punk scene was crazy. You still had a real sense of community amongst the punkers.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'd also get all these surfers integrated into it and just random people that would just be curious,
Mm-hmm.
and open-minded. Like I had a lot of friends that weren't necessarily like punkers, but they were like really, really, liked the music and accepted it just like other music, where a lot of people wouldn't.
Right.
Like when the Sex Pistols and the Ramones came out, I was like really into like UFO and Hendrix and Sabbath and Zeppelin and like, Thin Lizzy, ZZ Top, all the stuff, so whatever the heaviest stuff back then that I could find,
Right.
and then all of a sudden when the Ramones and Sex Pistols happened, I just thought it was something that everyone was going to like as much as I did.
Mm.
And I remember turning friends onto it, and they were just like, "You're weird. Why do you like that stuff?" But then I had like people like Eric Hench and Paul Marino, and like people that would let me bring those records over to their houses,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd play them, and they'd actually get into it and listen to it, You know what I mean? Steve Price, of all people, was like my partner in crime, you know, in the real young days before I even cut my hair.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were going to punk shows, like when Mountain Mike's or whatever over by Dunlop's was JJ's Pizza.
Okay.
They used to have insane shows. I mean, like great bands would play there. And then the Civic at that time, you know, the Civic used to get bands like AC/DC, you know, like X, Ramones, you know, you name it. Just Slayer played there. I mean, it was just Devo. I mean, you name
Wow.
it. Just, it was like the place to go see shows, especially for us because we weren't over 21 and we couldn't go to the Catalyst. But the Civic used to have a lot of good shows, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it just kind of, I don't know. It was just, like I said, it was a lot of fun. And a lot of the surf people did get into it, just kind of the novelty of it and kind of just get into it on a lighter side where we were more immersed in it, like me and Keith Meek and, you know, a lot of the people that were really into it early on. We were into it.
Yeah.
We were hardcore punkers. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, there was a lot of people going to the shows that weren't, that were just curious or into the energy. And,
Yeah.
you know, they weren't going to commit to the life as much as we did, but they were at the shows and they were into it, you know.
Yeah, it seemed like a super fun time, like just to be kind of running around on the streets. And can you like just go into the origins of BL'AST? Like, how did that all start with you with music? I mean, you're talking about some of your early inspirations and what you were kind of into, but like as far as, you know, like do you remember the first things that you wrote down, or did you pick up an instrument first, or what was that? What did that look like for you?
Well, I would always just kind of write stuff, and it was like Steve Isles and I had this. We started making this little band, and this was before he played drums. He actually like went to Kmart and bought a bass. You know, it came in like a little box. Came out, you know, we plugged it in. We started writing songs, and there was this guy Johnny Peters, who was like a Midtown kid that was a lot younger than us. Like he was really young, and his brother, you know, had played with like Camper Van Beethoven and Cracker and was like a super pro musician, but he'd sit in with us like kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like 16 and Johnny was probably like 13 or 14. And then, you know, Steve was, I think like a year or two younger than me. And that's kind of how it started. And it never really went anywhere, did anything. And we were just going to all the shows and just inspired by all the bands that we were seeing at the time, like Black Flag, Minor Threat,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like everything that was coming through around that time. And like we were at every show in the city all the time, you know, and then we met people from all over. And the BL'AST dudes, like everyone called them the Sacto Boys, you know, before like there was them and a few other people that were like this group of punkers, skater punkers from, you know, they're actually from Meadow Vista, Grass Valley.
Mm-hmm.
But like everyone called them the Sacto Boys, even though they weren't even from Sacramento. But
Sure.
it was all Sacramento to us.
Yeah,
Santa Cruz, you know?
right.
So it was kind of funny because we started, you know, meeting those guys and seeing them at shows and getting to be friends with them, but didn't really know them. And then they, like Bill Torgerson and Steve Borick and Dave Cooper sort of lived half here and half up there. His mom, he grew up, you know, like in that neighborhood up by Mesa Grande area, Cabrillo. And so, you know, he was the very first person out of the band that I met. And then the other guys like moved here and they had it was actually the first place that I moved out when I was right around my like 18th birthday. And it just happened to be the same year that the Sandbar, you know, the 100-year Sandbar
Oh yeah.
was happening. So they had a place on Bixby Street and they all moved in there. And there was one summer, you know, where it was like Peter Tesdorf, me, you know, Steve Isles, and Steve Isles' parents, you know, just let everyone like transform his garage room into a practice studio. And, you know, there'd be like 11 mattresses on the floor. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone was just crashing out there and surfing all day and playing music and going to the shows and skating. You know, there's a ramp, doing whatever. And so the BL'AST dudes, Bill and Steve and Dave, they were like jamming this stuff, and there's the one song, like it was, like what was about to be MAD. And there was a song Holocaust that was a really, the one song that got really popular from that band on this record, All's Quiet on the Western Front, that like Maximum Rock and Roll put out.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a trip because I kept hearing that song over and over and over and over again. And I didn't really want to be a singer because I felt like I couldn't sing.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was sick of hearing that song because it was such a rad song. And I just couldn't help it. I just wrote lyrics to it.
Oh, sick.
And so I wrote the lyrics. And originally, I met those guys through Keith Meek. That's how I met those guys. And it's also how I ended up in Dusted Angel. But it was like Keith, supposedly was going to sing or something, is what I thought. I was like, oh, I thought Keith was going to sing. And it's like, no, he's not going to sing. You should sing. And I'm like, well, I can't sing,
Mm-hmm.
And because I just gave him the words, like, here,
Right.
you should use this song.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, why don't you sing it? So then I did that. And then all of a sudden we just started playing. And that band actually got really popular outside of Santa Cruz. We were playing all over the Bay Area and playing these big shows with like Dead Kennedys and Crucifix and all kinds of stuff. And it just kind of like really took off, even though I think I was 17 at the time and the other guys were like 18. But it was just kind of what eventually became BL'AST. It was the same people except for Mike. Mike was always going to move here and join the band. That was like the plan. And then like we did that and that lasted for a while. And then it just got to a point where, the punk scene for me was just getting a little too hectic. Like so many of my friends, ended up homeless and on drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And, like hard drugs and stuff. And it was just getting kind of like depressing and stuff to the point where I was getting more into surfing, and then I was kind of influenced by some other people and different kinds of music. I was listening to like The Cure and The Smiths and, Joy Division and a lot of, this other kind of more stuff that definitely wasn't punk, I was still into the punk. But the scene was just starting to get kind of weird.
Yeah.
I can't really explain it, but it was just getting more and more violent and more weird. And just something that I was just kind of like, felt like I needed to expand out of. And I was like, thinking I'm going to surf contest and go to college and turn kind of like preppy almost for a second, that 80s look,
Yeah.
like bright clothes.
Sure.
And like stupid bleached flat top. And
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where, Niter finally moved down to, be in the band and they started jamming, and I was just kind of like, they'd come by and try to get me to sing and stuff. And I'd be working at the Catalyst and I'd have my Argyle sweater on. I'd be like, why don't you get my brother to sing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do this. Why don't you just get my brother? He looks like me. No one's even going to know the difference. So they actually did that.
Yeah.
For a couple shows. And then I was going to move down south and go to college in San Diego. And just weirdly enough, like somehow, I think it was like Jimmy Black or an old friend, like somehow I ended up with a tape of the first BL'AST record that was what was going to be the first BL'AST record.
Mm-hmm.
And it was life-changing. Like I heard it. And I heard, Time to Think was probably the song I heard first, where like the scratching and then the explosive, destructive, like, I was just like, it was just so heavy. I was just like, if I don't do this, like I'm stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to do this. Like
Yeah.
this is just, it just kind of snapped me out of like the stupidity of the situation I was in. And I was starting to realize that like, I felt like, oh, I need to be normal. I need to be around normal people. And then I got around normal people and I realized that, quote, normal people are way weirder and way more fucked up than any of my punk rock friends ever were.
Yeah.
And just in a more, weirder, more underhanded way, So then it was like just this natural transition. It was just in my mind, like, this is what I'm going to do. And then that's when the recording started with BL'AST, where we wrote to those songs, and we did the very first recording, and which was like way slower than the record that people actually know. Mm-hmm. Like the first couple of recordings before the record were like molten slow. And a lot of people to this day actually prefer that, like Corrosion of Conformity and people like that. When the actual record came out, they're like, oh man, you really sped things up. They like the heavier, slower one. And it was just kind of funny because, like back then, like people would just trade tapes. You know what I mean? There was no internet. There was just like this like pen pal tape trading thing of people all over the world and all over the country trading tapes and cassettes and talking about bands. And like when Minor Threat came out to San Francisco for the first time, all they had was like 1 7-inch. Actually, the 2 7-inches might have come out, but I mean, it's not like they had a real record or anything. But yet, everybody knew about it, and the shows were insanely packed. Like it didn't take much. It's like there was that networking that happened where the word just got out.
Underground
Where
movement.
now it's to the point where it's almost overkill with the internet. It's almost like there's too much out there, but back then there kind of wasn't. So when the BL'AST demo got out there, it was just getting into hands all over the world.
Yeah.
And all over the country. And all of a sudden, our friend Cara, who had this magazine called Grudge back in the day, she somehow had turned it on to a bunch of people down south. And so we got this invitation to play in Oxnard with the Youth Brigade. And that was our first Southern California show.
Whoa. And
it was just, like BL'AST was the kind of thing, once it got rolling, when we played the first couple shows we played were with DOA in Monterey and then with Black Flag in Monterey. And that's where we met the Corrosion of Conformity guys.
Yeah. And
we were kind of just, not really gelled into our sound, but it didn't take long before we really got in to the groove. And like the BL'AST thing was, pretty much like probably one of the heaviest things around at that time in terms of sheer musical power and velocity of just, like just that crushing heaviness of it all and the insane buildups. And like, it was kind of taking like what Black Flag and SSD did, but in this way that was just way more pummeling. And so, when we did that first show in Oxnard, it was just like, it was on, like people were super into it. And then we just started moving farther south. And then we started playing these huge shows, Fender's Ballroom was like the place back then. And that was our first like really giant show, but we were playing all over Southern California. We played the Olympic Auditorium with Slayer, a couple years later, and it just kept like escalating to the point where we were consistently playing, very large shows, and people were really into it. And it just was a natural time. Like the guys in DI were good friends of ours, Adolescence DI. And there was a guy, Jack Kerrigan, who was their manager, who, when he found out that we were playing with the UK subs and Bad Religion at Fender's Ballroom, he's like, oh, I'll get you a hotel room, it'll be totally cool. And we're like, cool, he got us a hotel room. But we didn't realize at the time that he had, that someone, another punk musician had shot someone with his gun.
Oh, shit.
So the cops were after him, and he was doing a lot of coke at the time. And he's in our hotel room, like looking, opening the blinds and closing them and looking out the window. And we're like, okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Right.
And meanwhile, we were a little bit like freaked out because the first time we went to Fender's, to see Dr. No and Descendants, like Bill, our drummer, got beat up by all these like punk rock gangs. Mm-hmm. So we thought maybe they were still after us. And there was kind of this hint of paranoia before we like figured out that it was just how shit was down there.
Sure.
It's like everywhere you would go down there, it was like just violence, at that time, because the gangs, the punk rock gangs were so heavy. And so then this Jack Kerrigan guy, he ends up like hooking us up with this label Green World that DI was on, and Jane's Addiction was on there and stuff. And so they put out our first record but they were more of a distribution company more than an actual label. So they like put the record out, and like people still have those original copies and stuff, but the label or the distribution company itself sort of folded pretty fast. And by that time, we were already working on our next record. And it was just really weird because like there was a whole thing with like Henry Rollins, you know, like hating BL'AST and all this shit. And
Oh, really?
we thought that all of Black Flag like hated BL'AST and stuff. And so when we're playing these shows, like Chuck Dukowski, the bass player, who I was friends with, you know, before BL'AST and stuff, started showing up at our shows, and he was always like right in the front row. And he's a really like intense guy, and he's always just looking at us like in the front row. And he's at every show, and I'm like, oh my god, he's here to assassinate us, you know,
Yeah.
or something, you know. And it was just kind of funny because I ended up talking to him, and he was just like, you know, man, I really like what you're doing with this stuff. It's really heavy and it's really cool and blah blah blah. And then so when it got to the time where we're like, yeah, you know, the label we're on kind of folded, and or is on, we're not really happy with the label. And he goes, well, you guys could probably be on SST. And we're just like, no way. Like, that's insane. Because at the time, that was like the label to be on, in my opinion. I mean, it was Sonic Youth, Descendants, Bad Brains, Black Flag, Minutemen. I mean, you name it, you know, Husker Du. It was just Dinosaur Jr., Meat Puppets, you know, just so much great stuff. And to be a part of that was just like, no way. That's, you know, it was like off limits to us. Like it was something that would never happen. And so when that happened, that was really mind blowing, you know, and
Wasn't that started by Greg from Black Flag?
yeah.
So, and you thought that they wanted to kill you, but they were really wanting to freaking
Yeah.
swoop you guys up.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And then it was like, and Chuck helped us get our first record back. Because the first record that SST released was actually our second record, It's in My Blood. And then he kind of helped us, like Enigma Records, which was also a good record label at the time, ended up with the first record. And they were like, oh, I really wish you'd stay on Enigma and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and Chuck is like, whatever, you know, we'll give you the money to buy it back, but you do not say anything about being on SST. So we ended up getting all our parts back for like $300, where if they would have known that, you know, SST was involved, they would have charged them a lot more.
Right.
It was just
Wow.
kind of, you know, like, and SST at that time was just so great. You know, any equipment we wanted, anything we wanted, we would get. You know, you know, we'd build these custom rat cabinets that Dave Rat would make, you know, and they'd, you know, pay for the equipment. We'd have these meetings, you know, they were just really, really thorough and on it, you know. And eventually, you know, like a lot of people like have bad things to say about SST because I guess, you know, Greg didn't pay some people and stuff. But back in the underground days, it's like the way things worked, you know what I mean? There was like a huge distributor. It was Gem Distribution that folded, and SST took like a, you know, a couple $100,000 loss, which was, they just had to eat it basically.
Yeah.
Which basically would have been everyone's royalties and everything. So things just got really difficult beyond a certain point, which was kind of just what happened with independent labels. You know what I mean? They're on top for a while, and then stuff happens, and then, you know, there's a new thing that kind of takes its place or whatever. But initially, I mean, it was just so great to be on SST. That's like definitely one of the favorite times in my life.
Yeah.
Is that time period.
Well, and it opened up a lot of doors.
BL'AST records, yeah.
Yeah. Well, then it exposed you all to all these, you know, these punk rock fans who are around the world, basically, and then you end up inspiring. Don't want to get too far ahead, but then you end up inspiring some young guys, you know, who go on to do some great things themselves. You know, like I know that, you know, Dave Grohl and like I'm sure Josh Homme and all those guys were inspired by listening to, you know, your stuff when they were little kids, you know, so.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like the fact that Dave Grohl, you know, remixed "It's in My Blood," and he actually played. Him and Chuck Dukowski, the bass player for Black Flag, played on a 7-inch that we did when Nick and Joey were too busy doing other stuff. And that was really fun. And Dave's just been great. I mean, the first time I met him, I remember he was just like this really young kid, you know, like Scream ended up like having their drummer quit, you know, and then like, oh, you got to see our new drummer, man. He's crazy. And like, and we played CBGBs with Scream, and I think it was like Instead or something. And I mean, just seeing Dave Grohl, like, he was like this metal kid just wailing,
Yeah.
just killing it, you know?
Yeah.
And then, so yeah, we were really good friends with, you know, all those guys. And Dave Grohl's been a friend, you know, pretty much since the 80s. And it was like, when it came time to, you know, do this remix of It's in My Blood, like we were kind of like thinking, you know, we had a lot of people in mind, like Kurt Ballou from Converge is one of the best heavy music guys in the world. And we were trying to figure out, you know, where we were going to do it and who's going to do it. And Greg from Southern Lord, who was the guy that was putting it out, just somehow like Dave heard about it and just said, hey, we're doing it here. I'm doing it. You know, I'll do it for free. Just don't do it anywhere but here. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
And it was like really cool. And it was like that, you know, the tapes were like almost destroyed, you know, like everyone was all excited about it. And then they put the tapes, you know, on the reel, and it started breaking apart and flaking off, you know. So they did this process, it's called baking, where they somehow, it's some kind of weird process where they like heat it up or something, and it like gets it back to a like
Rescues it.
restored state. Yeah.
Wow, crazy.
And they pulled that off, and then that was really cool. And then, you know, like William Duvall, who's a current singer for Alice in Chains.
God, that guy's a great musician.
Yeah. And yeah, he lived with me on 36.
Oh, no way.
When he came out here for a while, he was in the band for like probably a year, 6 months to a year. But we did a lot of our best shows with them. And that's when we were writing and recording It's in My Blood. And it got to a point where Mike just decided he wanted to have one guitar player and that we could gate our sound, you know, and make it tighter and like, and so he went back to Atlanta where he was from. And then we pretty much, there was his 2 songs on the record, but outside of that, like Mike redid all his tracks. So when we did this remixing it had been 26 years actually since I'd talked to William. And it was just funny because all of a sudden, like, you know, and when we did this recording too, like we had just such a crew there. Like Nick Oliveri was going to start playing bass for BL'AST if we did live shows. He was there. Scott Hill from Fu Manchu was there. Greg Anderson from Southern Lord. And like Sam Velde and Brian Brown. And there was always this big crew of people, you know, hanging out that were people that knew our sound. That, you know, so there was like all these different ears able to be like, no, more of this and more of that. And we'd go out and listen to it in car stereos and every kind of stereo imaginable. And it was just such an incredible like thing to be a part of. And especially like, you know, everyone's there and all of a sudden Will's tracks come up and you're hearing, you know, like the intro to Only Time Will Tell with his like guitar, you know, in the mix again. And we're just like, oh my God, you know, and Alice in Chains had just recorded a record there at 606. So John Lewstead, the engineer guy was like, we gotta keep this. This is insane. And I'm just like, yeah. And he's just like, I got his phone number right here. Give him a call, you know? So I called him up and it had been 26 years since I'd talked to him. Like we kind of figured that out. It was kind of like, holy shit, that's a long time.
Yeah.
You know? And he was just so like stoked. He's like, man, he goes, that is so great. He goes, I heard about this. He goes, definitely use my tracks, you know, just give me full credit, whatever. And it was just really cool to catch up with him. You know what I mean? And he was just like talking about just how like what an incredible record and how progressive it was for the time, you know, for music to just that music to exist at that time, you know. So he was really into it. And then that was like another really cool part of it is he came to San Jose to play a show at Shoreline, and me and Steve Isles took Michael Isles when he was really young, a young guitar player, to go see Alice in Chains, and then we took him to the Foo Fighters and stuff, and it was like really cool to just catch up with him, and it was just like, I don't know, it was just a really rad experience to dredge that stuff back up.
Yeah. So like around that time, just to, we went a little bit forward into the future, but going back to the time where, you guys started really blowing up in BL'AST, you're starting to get this kind of like worldwide and really like in the kind of the upper echelon of the scene, like all these people starting to take notice of you, and that led to all this popularity, and you guys started kind of doing some stuff with another big phenomenon at the time, which was Santa Cruz skateboards.
Oh yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that all kind of got going.
Well, Mike was the head of the screening department. I worked there. Steve worked there, but that was after he was not in the band anymore. But it was like, yeah, it was a trip. I mean, it was just like the way the whole Roscop like thing is. I'm kind of assuming that you're gonna, the whole poster thing with him jumping over us.
Yeah, yeah.
The way that happened, I don't even really know how that happened. I guess like someone just came up with the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it was, it was probably Rob himself or something. And so we're like, okay, cool, and at the time, even before that, like when we would go on tour, we would bring, the new Meekster deck, like the new Slasher model, Salba, Roscop, like just whatever. Like they'd give us like a bunch of skateboards, a shit ton of shirts, packs. I mean, just endless stickers, so we were always throwing out like Santa Cruz skateboard shirts and actual skateboards.
Yeah.
And eventually the skateboard thing kind of had to stop because like we threw one out at the Rat in Boston on our very first tour. And there was these two giant like meathead like football player looking bouncers, and it was the beginning of the two songs that go together, Time to Think and Surf and Destroy. So the intro happens, and during the intro, like I throw this, like, I'm pretty sure it was a Slasher model, out into the back of the room, right?
The deck or the complete?
The deck.
Okay.
It's just the deck. We never threw a complete.
Yeah. I was like, holy shit.
But it was like crazy because all of a sudden this, half the room was just this dog pile, and like back then the East Coast, Boston and New York scene was equally aggro, like the West Coast was or whatever, and maybe even more so. And like, so by the time the two songs end and the music stops, the dog pile is still going, and the bouncers just like, I thought they were gonna like literally kill us.
Yeah.
They were so pissed.
Oh, no.
And, and then another time, like way later, it was actually the Olympic Auditorium when we played with Slayer. We threw another skateboard out, and I think Dave threw that one out, the bass player, and it just happened to nail like some suicidal guy, like gang member guy in the head.
Yeah.
And so he's just all over us, getting all pissed, and we're like, we thought we were doing something cool. You got a skateboard? I don't want this shit. I'm Dogtown. I'm Venice, I don't want this Santa Cruz shit.
Yeah.
And so, that eventually kind of, okay, maybe no more of that for a while. The shirts, the stickers are cool, but
yeah.
But it was always a lot of fun, especially for people like in Kansas and Ohio and like, just all over the East Coast to just, go see a band, and then they're walking out with like a new Santa Cruz shirt or like, whatever, and a bunch of stickers. And it just kind of brought that little bit of Santa Cruz culture out into the world and the places where it might not have made it before.
Yeah, well, you guys got to kind of represent as the Santa Cruz guys, these guys. Santa Cruz had a reputation in skateboarding, surfing, and so that must have been kind of a cool thing to kind of, it's almost like a business card or something like that.
And Rob, he's a good friend, and in the beginning of BL'AST or MAD, I don't even think it was BL'AST yet, maybe the very beginning of when that transition from MAD to BL'AST was happening, when Mike moved out, it was like Mike and Bill and Dave, everyone lived in this 1 bedroom apartment, or maybe 2 small bedrooms, but it was a small apartment, like right above where that Greek place is on 41st now.
Oh, Achilles or something.
Yeah,
Or
like right,
no. Yeah.
there's apartments that are right above.
Right.
And they were all crammed in there. It was Rob Roscop, John Gibson, who's like an incredible skater and great person. We were just hanging out with him in Texas recently. And they were all in there living together, you know what I mean? And just, they'd all have their rooms made of sheets and stuff. And it was just like so different back then. And Rob, just no one had any idea what was going to happen with skateboarding. And then Rob started putting out those models, and it just got, bigger than anyone. And then, we had that opportunity to do the poster thing with him, which was an experience in itself. I mean, it was
Yeah,
just,
describe what that looked like to the people who aren't familiar with that ad.
that was insane. We basically went up. It was like kind of like when you take the Larkin Valley exit, off the freeway. It was kind of be this neighborhood that didn't really exist yet, but it was all laid out to exist. Like it was all paved, and I don't even know how we ended up there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, there was some houses like up at the top, but it was mostly just freshly paved roads, and, a neighborhood that was about to exist but didn't. And so we went up there and we found this place, and it was Steve Keenan, the team photographer, was there. Tim Pumarda, who's the guy who actually took the shot that we used, and Rob and our other friend Steve Cochran and a bunch of us. And we just and it was when we had these giant cabinets that Dave Rapp bought. Like they were just exaggerated, massive, massive guitar and bass cabinets, So we wanted the whole look, the whole front of the BL'AST look, and they had these big rats stenciled on them. And so we set up in the middle of this cul-de-sac, and all these old people are driving by up to the existing houses, and everyone's just kind of tripping out, what in the hell is going on,
Mm-hmm.
And they obviously, called the cops.
Yeah.
And so then the sheriff rolls up and goes, "You guys don't think you're going to play here, do you?" And we're like, "No way." I go, "Look, nothing's plugged in."
Yeah.
I go, "This is just a photo shoot."
Right.
And he goes, "Okay, we'll try not, to take up too much space and time, and definitely don't make any noise."
Yeah.
I'm like, "No, literally, it's not plugged in."
Right. Yeah.
Do it, right? So then we set up, and then Rob, there's a jump ramp, and he starts doing practice runs, and we're kind of like, "Whoa, this is sketchy." I mean, he's
Mm-hmm.
very close, he's coming over us, and there's the reason I'm leaning back so far is because he's right here. If I would have stood up straight
In the Matrix.
I probably would have got taken out. So it was just I'm kind of arched back, and we're all arched back, and we're, Rob is just flying over us, and on the very first run or two runs, just, the camera's not set up, nothing's happening yet. He breaks his board,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't bring it back up. So then he him and Tim Pumarda are "Okay, we'll be right back," and it was when NHS was in SoCal,
Mm-hmm.
Right at Wharf Road in SoCal. And so it just happened to be 5 o'clock at night or something. So the traffic was just totally insane, rush hour traffic. So we're sitting here, just lurking around with our equipment set up, and people looking at us super fucking weird,
Yeah.
What are you doing,
Yeah.
We're just where are those guys, And then they finally came back, and they brought a couple boards, and they're "Sorry, man, the traffic was insane." So just that weird purgatory time of just going, "Okay, this is weird. We're just sitting here in
Yeah.
the middle of nowhere, the vehicle left, it's
Right.
we're
Yeah.
here by ourselves." And then they showed back up and then started doing it, and there's, it was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, it's an iconic advertisement, and yeah, you guys got put in. Your music got put in their videos and stuff, and
Yeah.
so that was good exposure at the time. And
Yeah, that definitely, a lot of people, recently have told me, yeah, the very first time I ever heard BL'AST was in the Streets of Fire, or one of those early Santa Cruz videos and stuff. So it really did get it out there a lot. And the Roscop thing was so cool because Santa Cruz used it, and it was the poster, and they used it in ads and magazines like Thrasher and stuff. But then they also like saw the opportunity to cross over into more of like the music scene, the punk and metal scene. So they were it was on the back of like Rip magazine and Cream Metal. They were doing full page ads in these big music magazine twos. And SST was totally into it.
Yeah.
Because it just, like was a whole different medium of advertising for them, to draw a lot of people in. So that was definitely one of the raddest thing that happened. And when they recently reissued it, it's like, I know people that were, like it was always the big question anywhere up until very recently that I went, people would be like, how could I get one of those BL'AST posters? Roscop posters, I'll pay like $1,000 for it or whatever. And we're just like, we don't have any, good luck,
Yeah.
know? And so then all of a sudden, Roscop reissued all those boards again, which is super rad. And then he also decided to reissue the poster.
Oh, wow.
So now when you buy one of those Roscop boards, it's like under the plastic, you get a poster with the board.
Wow.
Which is really cool.
That's way rad.
And it was kind of funny because my friend had just paid like $300 or $400 for one. I'm like, and I even told him like, just wait. I go, I can't really say too much, but don't do that right now.
Right. Yeah. A word to the wise.
And then he's just like, oh, I just want it. I've always wanted one. And then I'm like, okay, well, you could have got it for free. Like, 2 weeks later, we had, all of a sudden everyone had them. And it wasn't,
well, it wasn't the original. So,
yeah, that's true.
That's collector's item. Well, let's kind of talk about, I know that you're involved in some more bands just than BL'AST, but just to kind of like leave off our discussion of BL'AST, like you get all this success and stuff, and what does that kind of look like for a young person who's in a band making the decision? Is this something that like I want to do as a career? Talk to me about your early aspirations and your ideas for where music would take you.
Like if someone is thinking they're going to make a career out of it, or it's going to be like any kind of financial gain is going to come out of music, they're high as fuck, because it's literally about 2% of the music industry that makes money.
Right.
And if you happen to be within that lucky like 2%, and I know a lot of people that have been, like Dave Grohl, William Duvall, people that, cross into the next level of stuff. But for the most part, it's just, you have to do it just because you like it. You know? Like nothing like, it's not like anything's really, you can never like be like, oh, I'm going to like make this band and get rich off it. I mean, it's just not going to generally happen unless you're playing really shitty music.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, I'm going to sound like Sublime and, make a band that looks and sounds like Sublime, and then all these people that are into Sublime will like it. But if you're going to do anything original, you're probably going to take sort of a loss financially. And it's just kind of, it's kind of sad the way the music industry works, but at the same time, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And it is grossly oversaturated.
Right.
There's just too many bands in the world, and a lot of them, like 90% of them completely suck, but they just take up space, and it just clutters up everything. And the, clubs and promoters get bombarded with these lame bands, and the record labels and everyone. It just creates this like weird, kind of like the oversaturation has such an impact on, it makes it harder for bands to get signed and harder for bands to get shows and stuff like that. So it's just kind of, it's just a weird scene to be involved in, and you just have to be doing it for the right reasons, and that's just because you're into it.
Yeah. Well, I think that just as we talk, I think, in that really like isolated, probably less than 1%, and especially from the world that you come from, but one person who I feel like, I don't know him personally. I'm sure that different people have different opinions on this, but one person that's impressed me going back to Queens of the Stone Age is Josh Homme. How he was been able to, through everything. And I'm sure that he's,
Oh yeah, well that's
staying
like
true to his.
he crossed over into that bigger realm, you know. But then there's a lot of bands like that do really great too. Like Fu Manchu is a good example. The Melvins,
Yeah.
you know, they're not selling out stadiums, but they're selling out mid-range venues wherever they go. You know, and they just keep getting better and better and better with time and age. You know, and like I said, the Melvins and Fu Manchu are just two great examples of a band that's like just, you know, they're kind of like not, you know, they don't have to deal with the stupidity of being overly popular and like a pop star or something. But
Right.
at the same time, they can count on, you know, sold out shows wherever they go. They make good money,
Yeah.
you know, doing it.
They haven't sacrificed their sound
No, they
either.
definitely have not.
Yeah.
And they work really hard, and so do the Melvins, you know what I mean? And they just, they've really created like a great like little niche, you know, in the musical world for themselves, to where they're definitely, you know, doing really well financially, but they're not dealing with a lot of the bullshit, and they control their worlds. You know, they've had their good and bad label experiences and survived that, and then they've just kind of made their own little, you know, world for themselves. And I think that's really, you know, way more respectable than some major label thing or something.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean?
But yeah, if you can do it and make it happen, and go for it. But I feel like something that kind of I admire about you is that you've been in all these bands that have made a lot of impact, and but through it all, at least in our conversations, you've always just like kind of felt like a fan more almost than
Definitely.
anything, and you're so psyched in the community and the underground, and just so yeah, I feel like are you proud to have been involved in all this?
Oh, definitely. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, it was just like I saw the amount of shows that I saw in the early days, you know, like for like paying like $3 to $5 at the door, you know, to see like on the same bill like Black Flag, you know, Adolescents, Minutemen, China White, or like Black Flag, you know, and like TSOL and Social Distortion or whatever. And like I said, the ticket prices were just a couple bucks. I mean, it was just such a real thing, you know. And now it's all become slightly more corporate, and the ticket prices are crazy. But just to be around at that time was just, it was a really incredible time to be around. And I still go to, you know, just as many shows almost as I did back then, you know.
Yeah,
I
what's
mean,
the state of punk rock these days?
well, it just, you know, punk rock is just such a watered down term at this point in time. You know, it used to just be like, and what people call hardcore, you know, like BL'AST was hardcore in the truest sense, you know, Black Flag, SSD Control, you know, like Cro-Mags, you know, Agnostic Front, you know, stuff like that, like Poison Idea, like that's hardcore. That's like hardcore, gnarly punk. But then somehow there's all these dudes that like look like they're hardcore, you know, tattoos on their neck and looking all tough and like whatever, but they play this like super anemic sounding, like you can't even call it punk. Like
Right.
I call it like the Fat Record sound or something. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's just so. Oops, not supposed to say that word, but
that's okay.
um, but for lack of better terms, but yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just really weird. But at the same time, like hardcore itself, like the real kind of hardcore, is alive and well. It's huge. You know, there's a whole new like young crew of like hardcore people. I mean, there's crustcore, there's hardcore, there's metal, there's doom. You know, there's so many different variations of like the underground thing, and like but like, you know, what hardcore has become is kind of like almost sort of like a, you know, like hardcore punk meets Pantera is kind of how a lot of like these newer hardcore punk bands sound, and they're like, they really carry the energy, and it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's kind of straight edge influenced, whatever. But I mean, it's bigger than ever,
Yeah.
bigger than it ever was, bigger than it ever has been. So it's like the fact, and just being in a band like, BL'AST or something, or, even like Black Flag, Circle Jerks, these guys are like 70 or something, and all the kids, like, you know, 12-year-old kids, teenage kids, young adults are flocking to see these old bands,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like that's the one thing about punk that is really different than other forms of music is it really like just keeps going. It just never dies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always going to be people interested in those classic old records that came out, like the first Circle Jerks record and the early Black Flag stuff and Minor Threat and, stuff like that. It's all just, there's always just going to be people just because of the urgency of the music, and the authenticity over it. Not that anything's really less authentic, even though it's like 15th generation or whatever it is now, but it is just, it's something that's always going to have that intrigue to people. And the fact that people, young people and people still want to come out and see us when we're old
Mm-hmm.
is really, I never thought that, that we'd be doing like blast shows when we were like senior citizens and people
Yeah.
would still be like coming out, and it's even bigger than it ever was,
Totally.
And same with, like Dusted Angel, like the heavy music scene has just gotten so much like so many people are into that style of music now as opposed to before. Dusted Angel's really become a thing because it's just kind of a natural progression where people, get into hardcore, these kids and stuff, and then they're like start playing instruments and then kind of want to expand out of punk. And that's kind of how it happened for us too, And then like Seized Up, I mean, we still have like so much, you know, like you can go around the world and people are going to be interested in what you do, even though this particular form of music has been around for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it, there's times when it starts to get, played out a little bit, like in the late 80s, like it died, and it became more college rock alternative. But then once it came back, like it came back stronger than ever.
Yeah.
And it's still just, it's not going anywhere. Like hardcore is always going to be around.
Yeah.
And like heavy music in general, metal, like, you know, heavy music is always going to be something that people just desire to be around.
Yeah. And then so as we kind of were talking about, these people who are going to be, sooner than later or already are senior citizens, like how does that affect like touring? How does that affect like energy levels with, performances and stuff like that? And what kind of challenges has that, posed you? And I know you've had a couple health issues over the years that have kind of
Yeah.
complicated that, but what do you see as your future as in, playing live music? Are you just going to...
I mean, I just take it day by day, especially after dealing with the cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with that and having to do chemo and radiation and bone marrow transplant and, you know what I mean? And just the effect that it's had on my body. But luckily, music is something that I could still do.
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of like, I don't know, like I like Dusted Angel and Seized Up are two current bands that I feel are, that I've kind of constructed in the way in terms of my writing and my projection that are possibly more age appropriate, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, they're designed to where I'm not, you know, working as hard or breathing as hard or doing, like to try and do blast. Like I'm super into doing blast when
Mm-hmm.
it happens, despite whatever, there's always something going on with blast that makes it difficult. But
Mm-hmm.
when it does happen, I really enjoy doing it and it's something that I want to do. But at the same time, I feel like, you know, it's just hard to like fake being 22 or something when
Yeah.
I'm 61,
Sure,
you know.
sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, with Dusted Angel, it's more like it's a band that, has been around for 10, 15 years or whatever, but it's still a band that we made when I was older. And then Seized Up, I'd finished up with like my first cancer treatments. And then we started writing our first record. So it was just kind of like the way that I write things now, like in BL'AST, it was just so much, words and breath and like energy, exerted all the time. Where with Dusted Angel and Seized Up, it's like you get, it's very energetic music, but in terms of how I write the lyrics for myself, it's a lot easier in terms like I set myself up so I'm not running out of breath all the time, and it can actually
Yeah.
like project the words in a way that's legible,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
hear that. Totally. It's kind of like a more almost deliberate or almost meditative type approach as opposed to spastic and super energetic running around the stage and stuff. Yeah, and it's informed because that's when you started those bands, and got into that music. And so, do you guys have any tours or albums coming out or anything, with any of your bands that are kind of that you're excited about?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Like Dusted Angel has really accelerated in the last couple years, and it was a band that was always, unfortunately, just kind of a side project band where we would play like a couple times a year. It's like we were always really into the music, and it was never like a thing of like let's break up or whatever. It was just like where everyone was at in their lives. There was different factors that just sort of kept it from happening to its fullest extent.
Mm-hmm.
And now, it probably has a lot to do with a lot of elements like people's kids growing up and people having more time or just more focus on that particular thing. And then getting our newer guitar player, Eddie, who's been in the band for the last 2 years, Ed Greger, has really made a huge difference. You know what I mean? And it kind of just became like, it was always something that I wished would happen. Like, I wish Dusted Angel could be a real band in terms of, doing stuff and putting out records and stuff. So to get back together and finally put out this new record that just came out, on Heavy Psych Sounds, which is a great label. And that came out September 19th. And then we have a new 7-inch out as well on It's Alive Records, 2-song 7-inch. And you could also get the record through the Dusted Angel. It just came out on Bandcamp as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you could get it direct from
What
us.
is that? Bandcamp.
It's just like a digital format, but you could also order the physical copies of the record.
Mm-hmm.
So you could like, you have the option of getting it directly through Heavy Psych or It's Alive, or you could just get it directly through us.
Mm-hmm.
We have them for sale at shows. We have them for sale on our website, Bandcamp, whatever.
Yeah.
And then Seized Up, it's like, I think we're going to start working on a new record, but the last Seized Up record was something I really, am pretty proud of in terms of how it turned out.
Mm-hmm.
And how, like, between the first record and the second record, like the evolution that took place, like musical, like evolution, and where it ended up just was really great. And, we went to Europe last year, had a great time doing that. And like, I feel like we don't play quite as much as we should,
Mm-hmm.
and could really like turn it into a lot more than it is. But in terms of what it is, it's cool. People like it, and we get to do some really great stuff. But it's like, and then there's always the thought of another BL'AST record.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the songs are there. I've heard them,
Mm-hmm.
so I know that the new BL'AST songs exist, and they do sound like they could actually be an extension of. They could easily be on the first two records. And it's definitely really true to the BL'AST sound. But I don't know. It's just for some reason, BL'AST is just more difficult with people living in different places and everyone being so busy in other bands. And there's just a lot of factors, and just the fact that it is just sort of, you know, people just expect to hear the first two records and a lot of the older stuff. So it's just a different thing, to have it evolve into an actual new record kind of situation. But
See where it goes. I mean,
if it ever does, I mean, like I said, the songs are there, and it could and it should. So we'll just see what happens. But in the meantime, yeah, I'm really, to me, like, Dusted Angel and Seized Up are like my yin and yang, like in Spinal Tap, where like yin was searching for his yang, It was like, it's like a perfect balance between the two different sounds, It's really cool. It kind of provides kind of two different kind of scenarios and two different kinds of, we're a lot of, most of the same people are going to see both bands, but it's just cool to have like the option of doing, the super heaviness of Dusted Angel and then the more hardcore, faster, like more punk style of Seized Up. It just makes it a lot of fun,
Yeah.
And when they're both happening at this, at the same time, and it's really cool kind of going, back and forth and doing shows with both, and it definitely makes life really like unboring,
Yeah. Well, yeah, it seems like you're in a really great place in your life. I know you had a lot of that scary health stuff, but just seeing you kind of flourish with your music, and you've got a sweet gal, Mindy,
Yeah.
and just, yeah, I mean, God, for a band to make it for over a year is an amazing thing. And then to be having bands that are still
Yeah,
around
Mindy and I have
after.
actually been together 10 years in
Oh, wow.
February.
Crazy.
So, yeah, we're getting up on our 10-year thing, and that's been really cool. And another cool thing about, Seized Up and Dusted Angel is both of these bands have a really clear understanding of my health issues, and are more, I don't want to say sympathetic, but just more, they kind of realize what comes with
Yeah.
the package. It's not
Right.
just like you're getting me and my vocal, stuff and, place in the band. You're getting all this excess medical baggage that
Yeah.
just kind of demands a little bit different, in terms of travel. Like I need more time to get out of hotel rooms and stuff like that. Get ready. It's like I got to really be on my stuff, have all
Yeah.
my medication handy and do all that stuff. So it is kind of a different thing, but as everyone gets older, I mean, there's so many bands that are dealing with a lot of similar issues, and they're still out there doing it. And for me, it's just kind of like, it gives me a sense of purpose where I can't work, at the Catalyst anymore, and I can't surf, and I can't do like a lot of the stuff that I used to do in terms of staying busy, but to just sit around in a room and not be able to surf and not be able to work would just suck.
Yeah.
Where it's like the music at least gives me something to do. It's a sense of purpose, and it's an outlet, and it kind of helps alleviate the pressure of dealing with that stuff.
Yeah, you're not Clifford, this sick person dealing with this like life-changing thing. You're Clifford,
Yeah.
the musician, and the guy that people want to talk about punk rock and cool shit with, So
Yeah, and
yeah.
life changing is the key word when you have those kind of medical issues. And it was kind of like when I like started dealing with it and was talking to people about it, I would realize that like people that I've known for years and years and years, like they would be more open to talking about their issues and their health issues. And as we get older, I mean, it's just something that just happens. Your body starts to deteriorate to a certain point, and all I've got to say is just use it or lose it.
Yeah.
It's like the more, like exercise is the key, and just trying to, you know, stay as healthy as you can under the circumstances, and eat clean and live clean and get plenty of exercise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and just kind of just, yeah. I mean, if you stop, as you get older, it's way harder to come back from stuff.
Yeah, they
So
say.
it's like you got to kind of try to limit the downtime and really focus on staying active
Mm-hmm.
and keeping your mind and body, exercise, and just try to stay sharp and on top of things. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of times where it's like with all the stiffness that has gone along with like, like I always tell people like I'm healthy, but I'm like a healthy 90-year-old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that cancer thing probably aged me like 30 years, but at the same time, it's like I just try to work around it, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like the effect that it's had on my body, and I'm not as agile as I used to be or whatever. And, it's, I really have to stay on top of it in terms of like swimming and doing water aerobics and doing exercises and physical therapy. I mean, because you've
Yeah.
been through it too.
Right.
So it's like, how important it is to stay on top of stuff. And it's just like, I think it really has a huge effect on your ability to heal, where if you just give into it too much and don't do anything, you're just going to literally waste away.
Yeah. Well, your
But if you
spirit
just
starts to
keep,
suffer.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
just, yeah, if you keep trying and keep exercising, and just do whatever you can within your realm of, capability or comfort or whatever, and just making it, you know, keeping it alive, because it's just, it really is like a heavy thing. I mean, the discipline that it takes to deal with the medical issues and stay on your medication all the time, even when you don't feel like taking it or doing the chemo and doing the radiation. A lot of people will just be like, I'm not doing this,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll just die. And then you do it and you kind of realize, like, as much as people say about chemo, it's like, and everything that I've done, it's like there's such a heavy stigma around it that I always picture things being like 10 million times worse than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And like doing the chemo on the level that I did it, it's not like I had to sit with an IV in my arm for 6 or 7 hours like some people did, because luckily they caught the stuff that I had early. But I mean, I was still getting shots in the stomach and I was getting the IVs, and, so it wasn't like the heaviest chemo that I could have gotten, although the bone marrow transplant was insane. Like the amount of chemo that they give you after they complete the bone marrow transplant. I mean, when they said 6-month recovery, I thought they were joking.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it was finally time for me to leave the hospital, I was like, could barely walk across the room.
So gnarly.
So it's like it does, and like that. But, what you have to do with something like that is you just have to, like, I was staying with my friend Dave, who owns Kong's Market, and lives there. And the market part was empty. So, like, I couldn't be on my own for like 2 weeks, close to 2 weeks. I had to have someone around me 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked from home, so I was able to stay with him. And he's like a really rad cook, so he made all this food. But the fact that the market was there and his property is kind of big, I would just do laps like on a bike around the market, inside of the
Mm-hmm.
market, and then I would like walk all over the property. And you just have to make yourself start moving,
Mm-hmm.
right away. And that's like, it's really important to just make yourself walk and make yourself, you know, just start getting back into the exercise. And I really think that the bands were really crucial in the healing process. You know, like when Seized Up was happening and I'd had that first round of radiation and chemo, I'd sit there and listen to them practice, and they're like, you should just try it, and then I started singing, and it's like just the whole air, blood and airflow, it really got things moving again. It really opened up my lungs and really got the blood flowing. And, at that time I hadn't even really done any exercise yet. And it kind of like really opened up my lungs enough and got the blood flowing enough to where it was kind of like a really necessary part of the healing to be able to do a lot of the stuff that I do now, like I just try to find stuff that's kind of a substitute for surfing. I ride my
Mm-hmm.
bike, I swim in the ocean, I swim in the pool, I do water aerobics, I do whatever I can. And I could actually probably try surfing again, but I also just feel like it's a really great time to not surf.
God, it's so crowded out there.
A lot of my friends that can surf don't because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's just so like just the mentality of the people involved in it these days is so disrespectful and so like it's just I don't know.
It's demoralizing. I had an incident
Yeah.
yesterday and it was just like, it was so moronic and stupid, and like, it wasn't going to do me any good to like freaking snap. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, you're conserving yourself by almost not even paddling out, you know? So I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's like and like I said, I mean I still miss it a lot, but at the same time I know like that it wouldn't be the same as when we were younger surfing. I mean, even like it was basically like the COVID surf craze, you know, and the whole Silicon Valley influx of just everyone all of a sudden deciding Santa Cruz was the place to be. You know, like the COVID surf craze was bigger than any Jan and Dean Beach Boys like 60s like surf craze or anything that's ever happened in the history of the sport. And I think it was probably that way with any outdoor activity. But
Sure.
all of a sudden, it was just like, I mean, you couldn't even surf through the point. It was like you could walk on the people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You literally, like, to make it from outside first peak through second peak without some idiot throwing their longboard, you know, at you or something, or bailing in front of you, or whatever. It was just so insane, and it just got to a point where you're just like, what is going on? You know?
Yeah. It's
And
crazy.
it's a whole new level of popularity and a whole new level of accessibility for people with Surfline and the whole deal, and like people like, you know, not taking the time to really learn about anything, you
Yeah.
know, like the ocean, and not respecting the ocean, and like, you know, every time there's a big swell and it's high tide, you know, the fire department's out there rescuing like 10 or 15 idiots that get stuck wherever they get stuck, you know, in by the rocks or whatever. It's just like no one like really has a clue on how surfing is supposed to work,
Yeah.
you know, and the rotation and the respectful like element of being a part of it. It's more like just this like really like grotesque free for all,
It is.
you
Yeah.
know.
It's so watered down, and all the, you know, like you were saying, the respect isn't there, and the ocean safety knowledge and all that stuff. And so, yeah, good time to get out of there if you have to. But yeah, it's, you know,
Yeah, I think
it's
I'll
one of those
probably give it a
things.
try soon.
Yeah, never give up.
And the stand up paddle thing, you know, is I don't have the same stoke about that, but I know a lot of people that can't surf anymore that have gotten really into that. And that is actually a great thing for me to do. Like I've done it a couple times, and it's really, really good, like in terms of for my body and what it does for my body. And, you know, it's not as, doesn't agitate the existing, you know, injuries or whatever, like impacts from the cancer. But at the same time, I'm not supposed to lift heavy objects. So to get this giant thing down
Yeah.
the stairs into the beach, it's almost like I have to go with someone. You know what I mean? I can't be as spontaneous and just be like, I'm out there.
They
You
have the
know?
inflatable ones though too.
I
That
know,
might be something
I
to look
know.
into,
I
you
need to
know.
get into that,
But yeah, so
but it
there's
is, you
ways to
know,
get out there, you know.
it's weird. That's been the biggest like casualty for sure for me, is to be like, you know, for surfing basically like, you know, most of my life. You know, like consistently since I was like probably you know, 8 years old or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just something that was such a huge part of my life that I did every second that I could. And then to have that not be there anymore is kind of weird. But at the same time, like I said, the circumstances definitely take the edge off that. Because I know that if I were surfing every day, I would just be like a frustrated, pissed off mess, you know, like everyone is that still tries to deal
Yeah.
with the idiocy of what's going on out there. And, you know, so I just do what I can. I still like to swim in the ocean and be around the ocean, and, you know, and there's, you know, I've gone through like huge periods of time where I didn't surf for a long time due to injuries and thought that I would never surf again. and all of a sudden I'd be surfing again, you know? And so the amount of mobility that I have now, like I haven't tried it in 2 years because it was just like, it was kind of hectic. Like I actually shrunk like 2 or 3 inches the way my body compressed when I had the compression fractures and in my back and ribs, you know, from the cancer, multiple myeloma. So it's like the mobility of paddling and neck movement is something that I just didn't have that I've actually gotten back
Oh, cool.
through physical therapy and through the water aerobics and swimming and everything. So I feel like I probably should try it again. And it's like, I don't know why it's just so frustrating. Like when I tried it 2 years ago, I had just started swimming again, which was starting to help, but I was still like really, you know, out of shape and my body was still weird. And I tried it and I just instantly was like, nope, you know, and just to go through that again, it's like, I need to just try it, but at the same time, it is kind of harsh when you're just like, okay, nope.
Right.
And I knew it in like 3 seconds of trying to paddle. I'm like, nope, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've gained so much more mobility and like freed up that, you know, back and neck area so much that I wouldn't be surprised if I could do it again. So look out.
Yeah, you just have to take, look at it in a different type of light and the way that you approach what you're going to do. I can't surf for 2 hours. Maybe I'll surf for an hour.
Yeah.
Shortboarding out of the question. Stand up paddleboard. Get out there. See the animals, the ocean energy, and all that stuff. And so yeah, you can. There's a lot of room to play with all that. It's a demoralizing thing. It's a big hurdle to get over when you know something as it was when you were enjoying it at a certain time. But you might find yourself back there sooner than you thought.
I mean,
in
just
a different
to
way.
even like be able to ride a wave storm for a half hour a day, I'd be stoked. You know what I mean? And it's like when I went through the first round of cancer and cancer treatments, like they got it really early, so I, was able to get rid of that. And then it was almost like, when I lost the weight and I was able to kind of rebuild my body, like on that particular time, which was way less harsh than this particular time. But I was able to just kind of rebuild my body in the way that I wanted, And then it was still really hard for me to shortboard, but I just rode a wave storm and had a great time. Like it was really actually like, and it was just kind of funny, like during that time period, that 2 or 3 years, before I couldn't do it anymore. I mean, it was just such a great time period, even though I wasn't like necessarily riding the surfboard that I traditionally rode or, would prefer. It was still surfing, and the fact that like I like what cold water does to my body, you know what I mean? And I think it was a really huge part of the healing process because, especially on a longboard or wave storm, I'm just like, well, I don't need to wear a wetsuit. I could paddle out there and get 100 waves in like a half an hour and just, you're warm as long as you keep moving.
Yep.
And so the no wetsuit thing was really something that I got into because I really felt like the cold water and like being immersed in the cold water was really did a lot for my blood and for,
inflammation and all that.
Yeah, just everything and just the blood flow and like keeping, I've even had a lot of people say that they thought that when I was particularly, in that time period of doing the no wetsuit thing on days when most people wouldn't, it was really doing a lot for that healing process in terms of keeping the cancer at bay, and really like keeping like just that cold water exhilaration and blood flow, I think really had a huge part to do with the healing process for me.
Totally. Well, let's go surf sometime soon.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to have to do. And we'll do some chair yoga before. We'll get all loose, limbered up and get out there. And I'd love to see some more shows in the near future. And I've just had a really great time chatting with you. And
yeah, this was fun.
We'll have to get into some more subjects another time. There's just so much to go over with you, with just your history in music and the culture of Santa Cruz. And so it's been great to to wrap out, and I'm looking forward to seeing where your music takes you in the future, and yeah, I'm a big fan for a long time.
Yeah, it's been good. It's like been really fun, we've gotten to do a lot of good stuff with Seized Up and Dusted Angel, and it really makes me happy to play with bands that I like and respect as people and musically, which we're fortunate enough to usually be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really kind of keeps me involved in the part of the music scene that I want to be in. You know what I mean? And kind of ignore all the other bullshit,
Yeah, yeah.
the more hideous aspects of it. It's like we tend to just stay in the safety of the underground and just kind of bask in like the bitchiness of like real music, as opposed to like whatever popular shit is out there infiltrating the world.
Yeah,
You know?
definitely. And just Santa Cruz, we've got so many cool people and
Oh
lifelong
yeah,
friends around here
yeah.
who get us and get what we're into. So it's a great place, even despite all the problems and all the shitty parts about living in Santa Cruz these days.
It's a shame that so many people, like have been so affected by like the parasitic nature of outside developers and the whole Silicon by the Sea phenomena, and like just the insane rent. And it just sucks to see people move away because they have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah, it's
Endangered
cool that.
species.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it was such a trip last night to be down at Rockview, and I'm like, oh my god, like I'm hanging out with people I know at Rockview. It's not just herds of like Airbnb mutants with their wine and just blah 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 blah, just
Yeah,
taking up space,
yeah.
inventing parking spaces, like
There's still a few
there's just
knuckleheads around there drinking beer and barbecuing by the
yeah,
beach, and
exactly, yeah,
yeah, so we'll be there. So Clifford, this has
cool.
been really great, and the time flies chatting with you, and let's get together soon, do it again.
Yeah, I'm definitely down to try to surf again too, and the chair yoga would be good in
Yeah,
Florida,
definitely.
so I don't get re-injured the second I try it.
Yeah. Right on, you guys. Well, this has been the Split Peak Suit podcast. We're part of the Santa Cruz Vibes podcast network. We're a magazine too. We come out 4 times a year, so be sure to pick that up. I think we just came out with the fall issue a week or two ago. So pick it up, grab it while it's hot, and we'll check you guys out next time.
Cool.
Yeah, dude.